What is going on, everyone? Jagan here, and we're back with another One Piece discussion video. And today we're going to be doing a power scaling video, specifically Kozuki Oden. How strong is he? How would he compare to the current day top tiers? And how great are his feats and how great was his portrayal back in the day? And I know it's kind of a headache to scale him because there's so much ambiguity that lies within all of his stuff. There isn't a lot of clear-cut evidence besides the fight with Kaido, and even that is tough because it's hard to scale Kaido at that point as well. So, we're going to do our best to break down just how impressive Oden is compared to his counterparts, specifically Whitebeard and Roger, since they are considered the pinnacle of the verse, and Oden has very strong connections to both of these. He has good relationships with both of these men, as well as interactions and clashes with both of them. But first, a little bit of background from Oden, and since birth, Oden has been a prodigy. He has ridiculous physical attributes, seems to have pretty good basic Haki applications, but not, anything advanced. And that makes sense because I don't think he trained at all. I literally get the vibe that this man did not train a single day in his life and that he literally just relies on his natural talents. And that kind of makes sense based on everything he's experienced. Wano is a secluded land. He had no natural talent for sailing and he always wanted to leave, so he would break laws and attempt to sail. And when he couldn't sail, in between all of these attempted breakouts, he would just be doing a bunch of hooligan and ridiculous shit. And it really signifies how much of a prodigy he was, like I said earlier. At age 2, he was catching hares. At age 4, he obliterated a bear by chucking a boulder at it. At age 6, he was visiting pleasure halls. At age 9, he was waging war on Yakuzas. It was just absurd, the kind of stuff he was doing. But the first actual combat feat we get of him is when he fights the mountain god. He was taking the blame for Kinemon stealing the little piglet from him. And this was considered a creature of legend to Wano. There was a story passed down about how it destroyed an entire village in the course of one night a couple hundred years ago, and Oden handled it fairly easily, and he seemed to showcase basic hardening while he was doing it. So again, nothing crazy impressive, but you can tell his natural talent is just out of this world. And the second real combat feat from Wano comes from when he was trying to subjugate Kuri by himself. Everyone knew about the ogre named Ashura Doji who was living in Kuri, basically controlling it with a bunch of criminals. It became like the lawless area of Wano that even Lord Sukiyaki, Oden's father, could not handle himself. But then Oden single-handedly defeats Ashura plus his entire gang. He defeats a whole army of his gang plus Ashura. It's not exactly the same Ashura Doji in the present who was cutting up Jack. He was one of the samurai that did not go into the future with Kinemon, but instead stayed back on Wano and presumably got stronger during that time. And for the next 9 years, there's not really any known combat feats of Oden, and I doubt he was training. There was really no reason for him to do so. He was kind of just building up his reputation as a daimyo. His samurai were getting cleaned up. They were learning what it truly takes to become retainers. Of course, until the day when Whitebeard crashes upon Wano's shores in the Itachi port of Kuri. And this is something that changes everything for Oden. Oden, of course, attacks Whitebeard and has a clash with him, asking him to take him out to sea with him. And at this time, Whitebeard is 44 and Oden is 27. This is a clearest cut prime Whitebeard, 8 years removed from the events of God Valley. And I know it's just a clash, and clashes in the series One Piece happen all the time. There's no power levels in One Piece really. You see clashes between characters who are several tiers below another character have, even clashes sometimes. This happened multiple times in Marineford. But regardless, this clash is still something that I consider somewhat impressive. Whitebeard is the world's strongest man. He is the rival of Roger, so even a clash means a lot to me in this sense. But what's even more important is what Whitebeard says to him afterwards. Whitebeard says, "You are not the type who follows somebody else." And that is some very high portrayal. He's basically saying that Oden is more of a captain, he's not a follower, and Whitebeard can speak from experience firsthand from the Rocks Pirates, who clearly had too many conquerors on one ship for it to work out, so it makes sense that Whitebeard would have this mindset when recruiting Oden. But those words are definitely something to consider. It's very similar to what Mad Monk Oruge said to Zoro on Sabaody Archipelago, that he doesn't look like the type to follow somebody else, so it must say a lot about their captain, right? It's kind of the first mate portrayal that separates him from other subordinates. And Rayleigh kind of had this too. Rayleigh was a conqueror. He was named the Dark King. He was considered a legend in the eyes of the Navy. Garp talked about him back in the Sabaody Archipelago arc that he didn't want to take on two legends at the same time when talking about the conflict with Whitebeard at hand and discovering Rayleigh's existence on the Sabaody Archipelago. Now, I'm not saying Odin has this exact same level of portrayal as Rayleigh at this point, but you got to look at the context of the situation and where Odin is from. He's from Wano, like I said earlier, a secluded area to the world government, and he is 27 years old, but that 27 is different from somebody who's experienced the sea, right? One Piece is geographically driven for its power scaling. And this is something that's been established since the beginning. In the East Blue, Devil Fruit users, just Devil Fruit users, were extremely rare. In the Grand Line, Haki users were extremely rare. And as you get closer and closer to the New World, Haki and rare Devil Fruits of all sorts becomes a just more common thing. Conqueror's Haki users are a more common thing as well. So One Piece is geographically driven, and if you have not seen the world, if you have not experienced the world and seeked out strong opponents in the world, how are you supposed to get stronger, right? That is the primary factor in gaining strength in the world of One Piece. So it makes sense, even though Odin is 27, that he's still not anywhere close to his peak because he hasn't left and seen the world or done anything outside of Wano yet. So I'm just saying that Whitebeard's words are very impressive for somebody who has not seen the world at all. Odin is basically as strong as you can get for being secluded for so long. He is the highest level of prodigy possible. His potential and talent is through the roof. And when he does join the Whitebeard Pirates, Whitebeard actually calls him Little Brother. And even though Odin does eventually join the Whitebeard Pirates and starts to command the 2nd Division, again, it's a clearly different portrayal than a normal division commander. The dynamic between captains and division commanders we've seen throughout the series are massive gaps in strength, such as Whitebeard and Marco at Marineford. You have Kaido and King, Queen, and Jack. He is clearly above them. You have Big Mom and the Sweet Commanders. There is clearly a massive gap, but that is not the case for Odin, who Whitebeard calls a little brother. And then later down the line calls him a brother straight up. So that's clearly a different dynamic that Whitebeard has, as opposed to him and his other subordinates having a father-son relationship. They call him Pops, he calls them son. It's clearly different. But even though Odin spent 4 years on the Whitebeard Pirates and he clearly grew stronger in this time, he still was not on the level of Whitebeard and Roger, as showcased when Roger kind of blitzed him and sent him flying. And then Odin looked extremely impressed when he saw Whitebeard and Roger clashing evenly and clashing without touching, using insane levels of Haki. So this kind of implies to me that Odin doesn't quite have advanced armament Haki yet, or at least not a very good grasp of it at the time. I'm assuming he was able to learn it eventually, because when the scabbard scarred Kaido in chapter 987, he literally was reminded of Odin's Ryo. He was asking if these guys are able to use the same Ryo as Odin. And I know Ryo does not exactly mean advanced armament Haki, it's just a term for armament Haki in Wano. It's what they call armament Haki, but I'm assuming it was advanced Haki in this situation because the whole point of Luffy's training was to bypass Kaido's scales and his tough skin, right? He was trying to learn the next level of armament Haki to injure Kaido. So given that premise, I'm assuming that's how the Scabbards were able to do it as well, and that's how I'm assuming Odin was able to scar Kaido in their fight, which I'll get to in just a moment. But after 1 year of traveling with the Roger Pirates after a 4-year journey on the Whitebeard Pirates, Odin did return to Wano, growing a lot stronger as confirmed by the narration. I already talked about how Odin has some very good portrayal, more of a vice captain or brother depiction as opposed to a division commander or son. And I am somebody who considers first mates to be relative to the captain, maybe not necessarily equal, but very relative. Like, I don't think the captain should have a massive gap in strength between that and a first mate, especially in a crew where quality takes place over quantity, where there isn't very many members, so the members have to be strong. You have to be an extraordinary member to be a Pirate King's crew or a crew that is lacking in numbers, such as Ben Beckman and Shanks. Jinbei was relative to Fisher Tiger. I think Zoro is pretty relative to Luffy, and I think Rayleigh is relative to Roger, of course. And I don't think Odin surpassed Rayleigh in this journey. I think he's probably close to Rayleigh because Roger and Whitebeard are relative, so I would figure Odin and Rayleigh would be relative. But obviously, this is just headcanon and assumption because I just don't think Oda would break away from his captain and vice captain dynamic with the Pirate King Roger and the Dark King Rayleigh. I think Oda would keep Rayleigh the second strongest, even if somebody else who's very strong like Odin joins him too. But, you know, we don't have any concrete evidence for that. That is just my assumption. And I really wish that during the Roger Pirates and the Whitebeard Pirates fight that he actually showed Odin fighting someone. I know he showed Odin fighting against Roger and kind of getting, pushed to the side for Whitebeard, but I really wish he would have shown Odin fighting against Rayleigh. It just makes sense that the second strongest of the Whitebeards would fight the second strongest of the Roger Pirates. And I don't know, Rayleigh was probably stronger at the time, but I think it was a missed opportunity for Oda there. So if you're somebody who considers Rayleigh Yonko level in his prime like I do, you can definitely make the argument for Odin based on these next couple feats that we're about to talk about. And for the record, I don't even like the term Yonko level. I think it's way too vague of a threshold to properly scale. But out of bad habit, I still do use the term since it's so imbued in our vocabulary and so much of the fandom uses that terminology. So when I say Yonko level, I'm obviously implying, the modern level, the modern Yonko, on the level of a Shanks, Big Mom, or Kaido in the present day of One Piece. But enough of that, let's get into the meat and potatoes of the video, which is Odin versus Kaido, the most important thing in my opinion when it comes to properly scaling Odin. And right before they fight, Kaido actually admits that he was lying 5 years prior to when Odin tried to strike him down the first time, that he didn't actually have the manpower necessary in order to combat Odin and the Scabbards teaming up with Hyoguro. They actually could have struck down Kaido previously. So Kaido took advantage of this and tried to amass a bigger army, and I'm assuming he grew a little bit individually himself as well because it wouldn't make sense otherwise. And getting to the fight, the narration does say that the battle lasted longer than expected, implying that it was a pretty tough battle, but it doesn't exactly elaborate on a specific amount of time like most battles against top tiers do. When Akainu fought Aokiji, it lasted 10 days. When Roger and Whitebeard fought, it lasted 3 days. When Kaido fought Big Mom on Wano, they were literally just kind of greeting each other, and it lasted the whole entire night. So considering this battle seemed to be a lot shorter than even that last example, I can't say it's an extreme diff fight. I gotta say Odin had the advantage for a while if he was able to cut Kaido that quick. And of course we all know what happened afterwards with the Momonosuke distraction. Oda is telling us here that Kaido needed this distraction to beat Odin. Like, there is no other interpretation you can make from this. But it begs the most important question when scaling these two is how strong is Kaido in this flashback with Odin compared to him in the present day when he's known as the world's strongest creature, when he is a Yonko in both name and actuality with feats to back it up. So let's take a look at God Valley for a sec. Kaido's age of the prominent members in the God Valley event is the only one who is unknown. Big Mom is 30 at that time, but Kaido still refers to Big Mom in the present time as an old hag. So Kaido is clearly younger than Big Mom, and he is clearly way weaker at that time because Kaido is literally an apprentice. He calls Kaido an apprentice the same way Shanks was an apprentice to Roger, the same way Marco was an apprentice to Whitebeard in the flashback. And it's not till 5 years after God Valley when Kaido starts to formulate his own pirate crew and become a captain of his own. I know it says 6 in this panel, but that's because the Odin flashback starts a year before the God Valley events, so it's a year behind. So obviously Kaido had 5 years since God Valley to grow strong when he decided to become a captain of his own, and then it's not until 8 years after that. So he had 8 years of experience as a captain before he comes to Wano, 25 years before the present time of the story. And then he has those 5 more years in Wano before he actually fights Kaido. So it's technically 13 years since God Valley. So Kaido has obviously gotten a lot stronger, but I don't think he's quite in his prime yet. When Odin is about to boil, Kaido apologizes to him for what happened with the old hag when she interfered with the fight. But Odin tells him, build strength while you can. And remember, Odin has been to Raftel. He knows the secrets of the world. He knows that a great war is coming in 20 years. He knows Toki's prophecy. Kaido is going to have the fight of his life in 20 years, and I can't imagine he didn't grow stronger during that period. Of course, his introduction tells us that he's been defeated 7 times as a pirate, he's been caught by the Navy or ships no less than 18 times, and that these challenges did involve the Navy and the 4 emperors. So Kaido clearly grew, it's just a matter of how much you think he grew, and that's very hard to tell. I'm going to assume he at least jumped 1 tier up. I don't think Kaido was quite on the level of the Yonko in the Odin flashback, and I think now obviously he is. He is one of the Yonko, he is comparable to Big Mom, and since Odin was clearly stronger than him in the flashback, I think Odin was on the level of the current day Yonko now. And I believe Kaido grew to a point where if he had fought Odin in his current day form, that it would be one of those extreme difficult battles, just like the Akainu vs Aokiji for 10 days, just like the Whitebeard and Roger 3 days. I think Kaido and Odin are very comparable. At least the current version of Kaido is very comparable to him. So taking all the evidence I listed into account, based on Odin's portrayal with Whitebeard and Roger, based on his feats with Kaido, I think he is very comparable to a prime Rayleigh, and I think he's very comparable to a current day Kaido and Big Mom. Nothing really suggests to me that he ever reached the level of a prime Whitebeard or a prime Roger, but I think he got pretty close. So let me know where you guys scale Kozuki Odin. I know there was a lot of ambiguity that goes into it. I know that there are a lot of factors in determining how strong Odin is, such as where you rank Roger and Whitebeard, where you rank Rayleigh, how comparable you think they are, how much you think Kaido improved from God Valley to Wano, and of course how much you think Kaido improved from Wano to the current day. A lot of people interpret these events very differently, so let me know if you agreed with my interpretations of all the events and where you guys scale Odin in his prime. But I do appreciate you guys tuning in today. I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed and liked if you're new to the channel. Let me know if you want to see more of these power scaling videos. I know I mostly do chapter analysis and character analysis, but I also do like to do these power scaling videos. I mean, come on. You can say what you want about power scaling, but everyone likes to do it to some extent. So comment below your thoughts. I'd really appreciate it. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I'm Jagan, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.